Welcome to the TSL Podcast. Steve Mayeda here, and we're dropping it here on our Wednesday night call, January 10th, 2018. You should be here, but because you can't, welcome to the YouTube channel or iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you're listening to this. Because, hey, man, this is a cool thing. What men need more than ever is to get together and talk about the dialogue and the experience and, man, what the challenges that we go through, especially with dating and sex, which can be so confusing and, man, well, run you through the ringer in so many different ways. So let's actually get into this one, because what I wanted to talk about a lot today is how now more than ever is one of the best times that you can be social. More than ever. And I touched upon this on another recording, but I really want to hammer it in kind of its own topic, because right now we have so many different ways to communicate, so many different ways to reach out and touch one another, so many ways to interact. Like if you're dating, you can do the online thing, you can still meet people in person, you can go to a club, you can go to a cafe. There's so many different outlets, yet all we see is dissonance. All we see is how we can't communicate. We have this huge message from men and from women about how shitty dating is, about how terrible it is. And I want to get to how this is a benefit for you that's so important. Like, man, and I got this when I was active in, my sexual life before, I was with Maria, and that slowed things down. Not with her, but with me in my promiscuity and so on. But man, I saw this, 6-7 years ago. This was a benefit. This was awesome that there were frustrated women. We hear a lot about METOO. We hear a lot about, sexual harassment and the fear that can happen if you're a man, being out there, these days, and you really get shamed and, persecuted and skewered and all this sort of stuff. But man, once again, another benefit. And here's why. Why? Because there's so many frustrated men, frustrated women who can't date, who are looking for pleasure, who are looking for satisfaction. There are so many angry women out there because they've had shitty experiences with dating, shitty experiences with sex, shitty experiences with guys who hooked up with them on their first, second, third, whatever date, and they felt used. They did not have good sex. They did not have a good time. We have so many people, when we just get into empathy of just connecting with people, that feel that they had a transaction with somebody, that you just had a conversation about your passions, but it meant nothing. You just had a conversation about everything that's supposed to mean something in our, society and culture, or whatever we heard about or read about, or the latest TV show, or whatever your conversation was about, yet they were afraid to invest themselves. You were afraid to invest yourself. Man, these are such easy fixes. All if you're just willing to get hurt a little bit, which comes with the expense of being yourself. The beautiful expense, the beautiful currency that you have to be yourself, which we're all afraid of. And we just did another podcast about that. You could check it out, or any of those things. But we need to know that right now is awesome. For sex, so many people who've gotten sex wrong, so many people that are sexually frustrated, men and women, so much to the point where we join all these groups, and hey, the pain's real, the pain's there. The groups are there for a reason. But there's so many people just dying to have a fucking man in their life that they could find pleasure and arousal in. And people don't know how to do it. The same thing goes for that whole social element. So let's talk a little bit about what we can do, because this came about, one of my clients, he was talking about his online dates, and he's very good at sexual escalation. If you want to know about sexual escalation, what I would say is check out, our courses. Actually, check out the free stuff link down below this. You just press it, and it will take you to a podcast or a page where there's this podcast. You scroll down and you go to the sexual escalation guide, or you go to the text messaging to get sexual with text messaging guide. They're free. You just click the button and it comes up, and you type in your email, and you could opt out of the email thing if you want, but that's kind of how our business works and so on. But you get it for free, and it's awesome, and it will show you how to sexually escalate or socially be in a social situation where you can get sexual in those different ways. It's easy. And we're all afraid to take that risk. But we were talking about this and we were texting all this stuff and he was like, Jesus, man, this is crazy. And I said, man, just give me your phone and let me text the girl. And this is somebody who he's been sexual with and, you know, they've had interactions. And she was like saying like, I want you to, you know, I want you to take me. I want you to control me. She's saying all this sexual stuff back. And I was telling him to say stuff that was really aggressive. And she was like, I want you to use me like a slut and all this stuff. And so I said, man, you almost lost me. If you're going to be my whore, you need to know how to step, or you need to, whatever. It was some bullshit I was texting. Some really good stuff. Definitely get the text message again. He's like, dude, this is too much. It's too much. And I told him, I said, look, man, women want to find the pleasure of objectification sexually, but not just by any man. See, if you're ever objectified in a social situation or in a sexual situation, if you're used clinically by a woman sexually, it's going to feel bad. If somebody just meets you and they don't care about your person or who you are or, you know, who, whatever your name is, my name, you know, who Steve Mayeda is, if they don't care about that and they make a choice or a move about you with that, it feels bad. Because you're treated like an object. You're treated like you don't matter. That's terrible. And especially sexually, that's terrible. But if you did show that person who you are, and the social setting is that you are, you know, supposed to influence each other, and I show them who I am, and they make a decision, and they say, man, you know what? I'm going to use you for the best point of the job. And I was telling my client, I said, hey, look, we do this all the time, where we step up to a cause or a belief, or we step up to an idea where we serve somebody else or sacrifice ourselves for somebody else. And this is a good thing. We do this with teams. We do this with our beliefs. We do this in competition. We do this in relationships where we sacrifice ourselves and we say, fuck, that is one of the best qualities about me. I'm not even talking about sexuality, but it's fundamental for sex as well. It's a little bit different. But we do it all the time with like, my identity as a man has to do with how I accepted loss or how I sacrificed myself for my team. And that meant something, right? So when we think about this in a relationship, we sacrifice ourselves in relationships all the time. This is objectification. You know, when it's like, oh my God, like, man, it was so, this beautiful example of me. God, I gave this woman pleasure. I just fucked her. It was so good. But the pleasure that I got came from what pleasure I gave. I ate her pussy, and Jesus, man, she wanted me in this way. That's a sacrifice. In a way, I am just a tool for her pleasure at that moment because I'm not getting that immediate pleasure. My pleasure was derived from giving her pleasure. That's amazing. Well, this happens vice versa with women, right? So there's pleasure. She gives me a blowjob. There's so many women. It's an interesting thing. Like a lot of younger women don't like giving oral sex. Some do, and some older women don't. And it's a choice, and everybody's different. But a lot of older women or women that have more sexual experience, that are in their upper 20s or maybe early 30s, like giving oral sex because it's empowering, makes them feel good, right? They are a tool for their man's pleasure, and it gives them power and a feeling and all this sort of stuff to do that. Very, very common, right? And if you get women talking about this, they go off on how amazing it is to just be right there and to have just to hold a man's like rage and tension and control him completely just in that one small act in that small moment. But that being said, you know, they're being a tool for their pleasure. And in some way they're being an object. But if a woman can decide to give her sexuality to a man, one of the things, one of the flavors of her sexuality is how that man can make her his. Now, another flavor of that is also going to be how he can serve her and how he can love her and all these different things. So just because we objectify in one way, just because we seek sex in this one way, doesn't deny the other ways that sex can happen and that pleasure can happen and that women may say they like sex. And a lot of times it needs to be translated massively, which is what we do on this channel, is to translate sex for men to please women. It's awesome. But in that, man, to objectify her, especially if she wants that, man, that's beautiful. And so if a woman starts saying like, oh my God, I just want to serve you or whatever, I have no problem And I see the great, and us as men need to have this discussion, and women also need to have this discussion too, is that to use her in that moment, to let her sacrifice herself for your sexual pleasure with what she wants, and determining what that is. Man, that is a beautiful gift. To tell her, no, suck my dick and make me come how I want to come. Give me pleasure. No, I am going to use your body the way I want. I want to fuck you until you stay fucked without regard for you for a moment. That doesn't mean that we don't have regard. That doesn't mean that we have to hate them. That doesn't mean that all women like to be abused. This is the big correlation. And this is what happens when we have a sexless and an emotionless and a culture that fears empathy and seduction. Because we have a bunch of people that won't talk about sex. They don't seek pleasure in sex, but their bodies are telling them to have sex. So they fuck somebody on the first date. So they go on a bunch of dates. They try and express themselves. They try and be themselves. And they run into a wall where they get rejection and it doesn't feel good. And it's better to serve the urge in their body, the urge in their hearts, the urge in their minds to seek out companionship, love, friendship, amicability, all these different things, to seek out sex without pleasure because their body told them to, because our world, our society, and our culture silenced their mouths. We have cut off our sex drives. We've silenced our dicks, silenced our pussies for social acceptability because of fear. And it's really, really terrible. And this is why everybody's dying to get laid. This is why everybody's dying to have these different forms of sexual outlets. Man, and it's crazy. Now, we as men seek power in sex, an objectification of women in sex in a social way, without knowing them, without letting them have the choice of deciding us, without letting them have the sweetness and the pleasure and the endearingness and all the flavors of femininity that get her to open herself to us so that we can find that true nature of perhaps that objectification. When she's truly decided. We, as a society, have made it so that women see men as objects, that they have to scan us, to put up their barriers first, to make sure their protection is up, to walk in fear of masculinity so they don't get used, to control men, to effeminize men so that they can feel comfortable around them, so that they don't get damaged sexually, so that they'll never seek pleasure. We're all trying to control sex. We're all trying to control pleasure. We're all trying to control our expression and experience and not being ourselves. And man, that is a sad fucking thing. And we live in a world where we're trying to find an answer in that. And we think we're going to get it, but we keep circling and cycling down into hate, confusion, anger, boredom, unrest, control, confinement, power, status. Man, when has that been the human expression? When is that there? And you can sit there and quote all this shit from history, but I'm not talking about that, man. We've had power for 10,000 years. We've had ranking and hierarchy for 10,000 years. And we live in a society where that's there. But we have to know that the origin of humanity, the origin of sex, the origin of empathy is far older than that, far beyond that. And we need to get back to that. If you start eating healthy, your body wants to be healthy. If you start socializing healthy, if you start having sex healthy, if you start connecting with people healthy, your range of humanity, your morality, your choice, your brain, your expression will choose, not even choose, will fall into the mode of being healthy. We set ourselves up for unhappiness just by confining and protecting the very desire to be happy. Man, it's so fucked up. In any case, TSL Podcast people, subscribe to it, be a part of this, join the dialogue. If you want to be on calls like this where, man, it's not just me, it's really the dialogue of so much stuff happening. Man, it's awesome. It's great. But if you're like, you know what, those calls seem kind of crazy, click the free stuff link down below. Get involved with what we're doing. You can join our free groups. You can join our paid groups. You can get our free PDFs, downloads, all that sort of stuff, and be a part of what we're doing. Because what we do is we want to pass on the message of sex, communication, masculinity, and so on in a way where there's men living healthfully, is that a word? In those ways. Because that's a fucking awesome thing. And that is what we do. I'm out.